Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com, the climate guy setting the record straight about climate. This video is titled The Climate Clown Show. The UK Guardian has just announced that climate change is real and that anyone who disagrees with them is going to be censored. There's really nothing new about this, though. They've been censoring me for years, as has the LA Times, the New York Times, and many other newspapers. Sunday, 26 August 2018. We are no longer willing to lend our credibility to debates over whether or not climate change is real. It is real. We need to act now or the consequences will be catastrophic. Apparently, free speech has just become too dangerous, and we need to shut it down in order to save the planet. Just look at this picture of the dried up corn. That looks really bad. We're all going to starve to death. Well, 6 years ago, The Guardian used a very similar picture in one of their articles. February 21st, 2012, drought may be the new norm for the UK, says Environment Secretary. So the UK was in a permanent drought 6 years ago. Note the dried up wheat in this picture, which is what wheat does every fall. That's what crops do in the fall, and we wouldn't be able to eat them if they stayed green. But a few weeks after The Guardian announced the UK permanent drought, it started raining and they ended up having a lot of floods that year. The Guardian, of course, blamed the floods on climate change just a few weeks after they blamed the permanent drought on climate change. So apparently The Guardian is going to censor anyone who doesn't believe that the UK is in a permanent drought while simultaneously believing that there's flooding going on because of climate change. Orwell described this sort of thinking as doublespeak, when people hold two mutually exclusive ideas in their mind at the same time and believe both of them. But I'm just getting started with The Guardian's doublespeak. It gets much worse. In 2004, The Guardian warned that Britain would be Siberian in less than 20 years. Saturday, 21st February 2004. Climate change over the next 20 years could result in a global catastrophe, costing millions of lives in wars and natural disasters. A secret report suppressed by U.S. defense chiefs and obtained by The Observer warns that major European cities will be sunk beneath rising seas as Britain is plunged into a Siberian climate by 2020. Nuclear conflict, megadroughts, famine, and widespread rioting will erupt across the world. So according to The Guardian, by the year 2020, Britain will be a Siberian climate, they'll be in a permanent drought, and there'll be flooding all at the same time. And major European cities will be sunk beneath rising seas sometime in the next 16 months. And if you don't believe that Europe's going to be gone by the year 2020, The Guardian's going to censor you. This issue is just too important to allow climate deniers a voice. But things just keep getting worse. We're not only going to freeze to death by the year 2020, but we're actually going to run out of ice by the year 2015. July 24th, 2013. Ice-free Arctic in 2 years heralds methane catastrophe. So by the year 2020, we're going to have an ice-free Arctic, we're going to have a Siberian climate, we're going to be in a permanent drought, and we're going to be flooding. That's really bad. And if you don't believe all this, The Guardian is simply going to have to censor you. Well, the Arctic wasn't ice-free in 2015. In fact, it wasn't even close. But that was no problem. They just pushed it back a year or two. Sunday, 21st August 2016. Next year or the year after, the Arctic will be free of ice. Well, that's now. Well, that's all scary stuff. And if that wasn't bad enough, The Guardian said in 1974 that a new ice age was going to begin soon, and we're all going to freeze to death. The threat of a new ice age must now stand alongside nuclear war as a likely source of wholesale death and misery for mankind. If you don't believe that we're in a new ice age, burning up, in a Siberian climate, in a permanent drought and flooding all at the same time, you're a climate denier and you simply don't get a voice anymore. So the Arctic's supposed to be ice-free in a week or two. Let's see how that's working out. This is a 1971 Arctic sea ice map from National Geographic. It showed the extent of the ice at the end of the summer in 1971. Now I'm going to overlay the current sea ice extent from the National Snow and Ice Data Center in Colorado as of today. Yellow shows the current ice edge, which is hardly changing now that the summer's almost over. White was the 1971 extent. You can see that there's very little difference between the two. In some places there's a little bit less ice than there was in 1971. and in some places there's more ice than there was in 1971. There's actually more ice along the Alaskan coast than there has been in many years. Ice extent is a little bit less than it was in 1971, but it was also less in 1958. 60 years ago, the New York Times reported, some scientists estimate that the polar ice pack is 40% thinner and 12% less in area than it was a half century ago, and that even within the lifetime of our children, the Arctic Ocean may open, enabling ships to sail over the North Pole. This bottom paragraph is very interesting. Although the idea that a solid ice sheet covers the central Arctic has lingered stubbornly in the popular fancy, the northern cap of ice worn by our planet is actually a thin crust, on the whole only about 7 feet thick. So 60 years ago, the ice at the North Pole was only 7 feet or 2 meters thick. And according to the Danish Meteorological Institute, that's how thick it is now. So the ice thickness hasn't changed over the last 60 years. So ice extent is about the same as it was in 1971, and ice thickness is about the same as it was in 1958. What about ice volume? Well, according to the Danish Meteorological Institute, sea ice volume is the 5th highest in their record, which started in 2003, and it's up about 50% from 10 years ago. That sure doesn't sound like the ice is disappearing. The Guardian has been wrong about every single climate prediction they've ever made, and they constantly contradict themselves. But if you don't believe them, you're going to be censored. You're an evil denier. According to The Guardian, the science is settled. 150 years ago this month, they announced that there was nothing left to be learned about science. The time for great discoveries is past. No student of nature goes now expecting to find a new world or locks in the heavens for any new theory of the solar system. The Guardian has no idea what they're talking about, but they're doing what leftists have always done. When they can't win a debate honestly, they simply censor and shut down the opposition. In 1933, the German National Socialist Party simply censored and burned the books of anybody who had a different idea from them. They too couldn't win the debate, and they knew that censorship was the only path to achieving their political goals. In 1933, Hitler and Mussolini were very popular among leftists around the world. The left-leaning Lincoln, Nebraska Journal and Star newspaper described Mussolini, Hitler, and Roosevelt as hosts of great men. Also in 1933, the famous left-wing Irish dramatist George Bernard Shaw expressed his love for Stalin, Mussolini, and Hitler. He eulogized Joseph Stalin and Premier Mussolini along with Hitler. He referred to President Roosevelt too as a man trying to get something done. Leftists are not yet at 1939 Germany, but they're pretty close to 1933 Germany, with the censorship, the oppression, the desperate need to shut down competing ideas. It's been said that those who fail to learn the lessons from history are doomed to repeat it. In August of 1933, the Baltimore Sun reported that intellectuals backed Hitler. Throughout Germany, there's a general sentiment that the outstanding personages of the world are President Roosevelt, Hitler, and Mussolini. Everywhere there's a feeling of optimism. Says professors back Hitler. I found the intellectuals, the professors in the colleges and the universities, supporting Hitler. George Orwell famously said, "So much of left-wing thought is a kind of playing with fire by people who don't even know that fire is hot." We're in dangerous times now with the left promoting censorship, violence, and oppression. The left is no longer willing to work within the norms of civilized society. They're trying to overthrow elections, they're trying to shut down free speech, they're trying to destroy our constitutional rights. Make sure everyone you know sees this video, and please be sure to visit Toto on the web at realclimatescience.com. He's been pulling back the curtain on junk science for a long time.